Okay, so get this. We've got something pretty interesting to dive into today.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about France.
Hmm.
And it may be a little bit more than meets the eye when it comes to their involvement or potential involvement in the war in Ukraine.
Right.
And for this deep dive, we always like to look at
Yeah.
different sources.
Right. Primary sources, secondary sources.
And today we're gonna be focusing primarily on a report that came from Intelligence Online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Intelligence Online, but
Yeah.
they're a website that specializes in
Intelligence.
well, yeah, exactly, intelligence.
Straightforward.
Yeah, so they're kind of they're known for kind of getting the inside scoop.
Right.
And this report that we're looking at is about a potential secret French military exercise
Interesting.
that was simulating a deployment in Ukraine.
Okay.
Now that in and of itself is pretty
It's intriguing. Yeah.
intriguing, right?
Absolutely.
But here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
The French Ministry of the Armed Forces
Right.
is offering a different take on this story.
Mm.
So we're kind of getting like a he said, she said sort of thing here.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have some conflicting information that we're going to have to kind of try to reconcile here.
Exactly. So that's what we're going to try to do today is kind of like suss out,
Right.
Right. What exactly is going on here.
Yeah. What's the truth? What are the motivations behind these different narratives?
Right.
And what can we glean from this going forward? How does this affect
Right.
our understanding of, France's position on the war in Ukraine?
Exactly.
So, yeah, this is definitely going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, so let's dive right in and take a look at this report from Intelligence Online.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, so first of all, they gave this exercise a code name, which is kind of interesting in and of itself.
Right.
It's called Perseus.
Perseus.
Right.
Oh, well, Greek mythology.
Yeah, and it
Interesting choice.
it makes you wonder, right? Why that name?
Right. Well,
And I guess
sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, it makes you think, are they trying to send a message with that? Are they,
Right.
Is there some symbolism there that we need to unpack?
Exactly. And they're also saying that that there were 3,200 soldiers involved.
3,200. Okay, so that's a pretty significant.
That's not a small.
No, that's a sizable force. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Not just like a training exercise with a couple of platoons. Or
Yeah.
something.
No, this is a large scale operation.
Right.
That they're simulating here.
And one of the other really interesting details that they pointed out was that the location
Okay.
of this exercise was chosen to resemble the Dnieper River bend north of Kyiv.
Oh wow. Okay, so that's significant.
Yeah. So what do you make of that detail?
Well, I mean, the Dnieper River is obviously a major geographical feature in Ukraine.
All right.
And that particular bend north of Kyiv, it's strategically very important.
Right.
It's a potential invasion route towards the capital.
Yeah.
And it's also just a key area for, controlling kind of the northern part of the country.
Right.
So the fact that they chose that specific location to simulate this exercise, it suggests that they're thinking about, a very specific scenario.
Right.
And it's a scenario in which they would need to defend Kyiv.
Right.
Potentially from a Russian advance coming from the north.
Right.
So it kind of suggests that they're thinking about a much more direct involvement in the conflict than maybe they have been letting on.
Right. So essentially they're like wargaming a scenario where they have to step in.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're running through the motions.
And trying to figure out, okay, if we had to get involved, like what would that look like?
Yeah, what are the logistical challenges? What are the, the tactical considerations?
Right.
How would we coordinate with Ukrainian forces? All of those kinds of things.
Right. And when you think about, some of the other details that were in this report, they were talking about how they were focusing on things like drones and electronic warfare and radio reconnaissance.
Right.
And high intensity combat.
Yeah. So all very relevant
This is not
to the current conflict.
Yeah, this is not like,
like peacekeeping operation.
No, this is
like,
how we're going in.
Yeah, boots on the ground.
Yeah.
High-tech warfare kind of stuff.
Right. And they said that this exercise took place in the autumn of 2024.
Okay.
And lasted for a week.
So again, pretty significant commitment in terms of time and resources,
Yeah, and
power.
And they were very vague about the actual location.
Right. Well, I mean, they're not going to reveal,
Right.
the exact location of a secret military exercise.
Yeah. But they did say that the terrain was chosen specifically because it resembled that Dnieper River bend north of Kiev.
Right, right. So they're trying to make it as realistic as possible.
Right.
Clearly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is all very interesting stuff.
Right.
But we do have to take it with a grain of salt because, as you mentioned earlier, the French Ministry of the Armed Forces is
saying something else.
Is saying something completely different.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
They're basically claiming that this is just an annual exercise that they've always done.
Okay.
And they even said that it used to be called Gorgones.
Gorgones.
But they've renamed it to Persée.
Okay, so another Greek mythology reference?
Yeah,
what's up with that?
I wonder if there's any significance to that name change. From Gorgones to Persée.
Yeah, and they're saying that it's always conducted on French territory.
And that it's under the command of the Land Special Actions Command, or the CAS.
Okay, CAS.
So they're trying to frame this as just, standard procedure,
right.
Nothing to see here, just routine training.
Right.
But what's interesting is that they're not actually denying any of the specifics.
Right.
That Intelligence Online is reporting.
Right. They're not saying, oh, no, we didn't have 3,200 soldiers there, or, oh, no, we didn't choose a location that resembled the Dnieper River bend.
Exactly.
They're just saying this is a routine thing. We do it every year.
Yeah, it's just like a coincidence that it happens to align so closely with the current situation in Ukraine.
It's just a coincidence that it looks exactly like we're preparing to intervene in Ukraine.
Exactly right.
So
it just makes you wonder, are they being intentionally vague here?
Right.
Are they trying to kind of downplay the significance of this?
Right.
Or is there really more to the story than meets the eye? Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I kind of keep going back to that question of why the secrecy about the location.
Yeah, that's a good point. If it's so routine, why are they being so cagey about where it took place?
Okay.
If it's just, on some French military base somewhere, why not just say that?
Right.
Why all the cloak and dagger stuff?
Right.
So it just kind of raises more questions than it answers.
Right.
And that's what makes this so fascinating.
Right.
We have to kind of look at the evidence that we have and try to piece together what's really going on here.
And I think one of the key things to think about here is what are the motivations?
Right.
Right? Why would France even simulate a deployment in Ukraine in the first place?
Exactly. Are they just being prepared for a wider conflict? Are they just kind of thinking ahead and saying, okay, what if this escalates?
Right.
What if we need to get involved?
Right.
Let's be ready. Or are they signaling something? Are they signaling to Russia that, hey, we're watching and we're ready to act if necessary?
Right.
Or are they signaling to their allies in Eastern Europe that, hey, we've got your back.
Right.
We're not going to let you down.
Right. And you brought up CAS.
Right.
The Land Special Actions Command.
Right.
And the French ministry did clarify that's who's overseeing this exercise.
Right.
For those of us who aren't, military experts, what exactly is CAS?
Well, think of CAS as the French equivalent of, the U.S. Navy SEALs or the British SA.
Okay.
They're highly trained, specialized units.
Okay.
They're the guys who get sent in for the really tough missions, the covert operations, the hostage rescues, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So the fact that they're involved in this exercise definitely adds to the intrigue.
It does.
It suggests that this is not just, some kind of routine training exercise. This is something that they're taking very seriously.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely a curious situation.
Yeah. So let's kind of try to wrap this up and kind of what's the takeaway here for our listeners?
Right.
We've got evidence suggesting a large-scale French military exercise simulating intervention in Ukraine.
Right.
But the official stance from the French government is much more ambiguous.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean for France's role in this conflict?
Well, it's hard to say for sure.
Right.
But it definitely suggests a potential shift in their stance.
Okay.
It could indicate a willingness to play a more active role in supporting Ukraine, possibly even militarily.
Okay.
But it could also just be a way of sending a message to Russia without actually committing to anything concrete.
Right.
So it's kind of like a strategic ambiguity that they're employing here.
And how do you think this might impact the overall situation in Europe?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, if France does take a more active role, it could embolden other NATO allies to do the same.
Right.
It could create a kind of a domino effect where you see more and more countries willing to provide military support to Ukraine.
Right.
And that could obviously have a major impact on the balance of power in the region.
Right.
It could also change the dynamic between Russia and the West.
Right.
If Russia sees that the West is becoming more united and more willing to support Ukraine, that could potentially deter them from escalating the conflict further.
Right.
But on the other hand, it could also provoke them.
Right.
It could make them feel like they're being encircled.
Right.
And that could lead to a more aggressive response.
Right.
So it's really hard to say at this point what the ultimate outcome will be. This is definitely a significant development. And it's something that we need to keep a close eye on.
Right. And I think that's a great point for our listeners to take away from this.
Yeah.
It seems like something's brewing beneath the surface. Whether it's a genuine shift in French foreign policy or just a show of force, this exercise is a significant development.
Right.
And it raises a crucial question.
Yeah.
Could this be the first step towards a more direct Western intervention in the Ukrainian conflict?
It's a question we're going to have to keep asking ourselves as the situation develops.
Absolutely.
But for now, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
And see what happens next.
That's something for you to ponder. And we'll see you next time.
Until then.
Thanks for listening.
Bye. Bye.